Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the PSA Podcast. Today we're absolutely delighted to have on a man who is a full-time coach, a UEFA A licence, and somebody that has had a massive effect on my coaching career, and probably if it wasn't for him today, I probably wouldn't be doing this. We're delighted to have Ryan McConville on the podcast this morning.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Ryan, you're very welcome. This is obviously an episode I've been wanting to do for quite a while, so it's great to have you here. Just probably one of the most common questions that's asked at this minute: what's it like being a full-time coach?
Yeah. No, firstly, thanks very much for having me on. And to the third time of asking, we've eventually got on, but I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And a credit has to go to yourself, obviously, for the work that you're doing. And since we met in the early days of Newry City when you're only a young cub, I don't know how long ago that was now, maybe 10 years ago now. I says, but you've really developed, and to see PSA develop and you as a coach, that's a very proud moment in my soccer coaching career to date. And when things like that happen, you know, this is why we do it, and I've no doubt that you'll have that effect on other players and coaches coming through in recent times. But how lockdown's been for me, I've been over in Scotland obviously for the last 14 months, coaching at Forfar Farmington in the Scottish Women's Premier League, and we were very lucky to sort of play football throughout the lockdown period. Now, some of our stuff was postponed, the games were postponed, but to try and keep us at that level and try and keep us up to competitive levels with the likes of Celtic, Rangers, Hibernian, Glasgow City, we obviously had to sort of think outside the box, and that's obviously where Zoom has come in. And we were very lucky to have Johnny Pedlow, the women's international strength and conditioning coach, work with us for over 2 to 3 months, where he worked with the players 2 or 3 times a week. And then we had a local coach, Tim Waring, and he worked on a technical side with the players, and not only with the senior players, he also worked with the academy players as well. Various coach education workshops, video analysis, looking on how we played, trying to work individual methods with the players and sort of focus them in regards to the lockdown finishing and our coming back. But we had to try and be glass half full. Otherwise, if we didn't use the sort of tools that have been sort of came to age in the recent lockdown and the recent difficult period, we would have been on the back foot. But lockdown was difficult for us all, definitely. But I suppose I was in the blessed position, along with the players and the league that we were playing in, that although the games were suspended for 1 or 2 months, we were still in the position to keep working away. So I guess it hasn't affected me that much, but it's definitely been a big learning curve in regards to thinking outside the box, a wee bit of improvisation as a coach, and myself along with a coaching team. We'll definitely remember last year for sure, in the obstacles that it's sort of provided. But that's what I've done over lockdown. Obviously, lockdown 2 provided a bigger challenge. We lost sponsors, we lost sort of our budget, and then it became a wee bit sort of impossible for me to continue on the journey at Forfar. I wanted new players in. I wanted to take the club in a different direction, because we were competing with teams that trained every day. I wanted to try and take us to 4 days a week. I wanted to try and take us a bit more in the professional route, along with trying to recruit more players from overseas. And unfortunately, the club wasn't in that position. So when it was new to go to my contract renewal, I just decided that I'd taken the club as far as I went. I loved Scotland, and the opportunity to go back there and coach in the SWPL is definitely an ambition, and hopefully I'll get back there someday. But I didn't want to leave, but unfortunately things just panned out, and I suppose COVID played its part in that. And then I moved to Kenya for 3 months to work with the National Federation at Kenya on their women's programme, along with an academy called Emerging Stars Football Academy. And for the past 3 months then, I've been working on trying to set that academy up for underprivileged kids, along with trying to get structures in place in the federation at Kenya. So I've been busy, now I'm back home and just enjoying time and obviously doing the podcast for you.
Good. So you're obviously involved in football full time, involved in football every day. You've had an amazing career. You've been all over the world coaching in various countries and continents. But just for a few minutes, Ryan, I want to take you back because you started off as a player, and you thought maybe you were going places as a player. Things were going well as a player. So I just want to take you back there. How did you get involved in football? How did you end up kind of playing in the position that you did, and just how did things begin?
Yeah, it's funny actually. I didn't start playing until I was about 12, and unfortunately I don't have the playing career of some of your previous guests. But I guess they always say it doesn't really take to be a fantastic player to be a good coach. But I started playing in primary school, primary 7 I think. I think our goalkeeper was sick that day, and I had been playing in nets just in the school playground, and one of my friends at the time told the teacher that I could do nets, and we played a school team. I can't remember what it was, the team that it was, but ever since then that was me sort of pigeonholed to being a goalkeeper. At that time it didn't really matter what height you were, so because we were always playing in small goals or something, but now being 5'6", and the older I got, then the more hurdles sort of came. But lucky enough, I then started to play, I think it was a tournament called Reebok Fives. That's a long time ago now. We played at Drumgore, and I was scouted to play for a team called Potters at the time, which was from Portadown, and that's where I played all my youth football. And we were a brilliant team. We had players like Kieran McCann, Barry McDonald, Brian Mallon. Played against players like Kevin Braniff. Played against big players who all went on to represent their country at a good level. Andy Waterworth, we played against a lot of those players growing up, and we won various trophies. We won the Northern Irish Cup, and then from then I moved on to play for Portadown Thirds, managed by Colin O'Neill, Motherwell legend. Went on to play for Glenavon Thirds, managed by Davy Dennison, Jackie Delaney. I think Billy Sinclair was there as well for the reserve team when I played a few matches there. And a bit of a nomad journey in regards to playing, because I wasn't mature enough. So I thought when you didn't get playing, that was your sort of indication to say you had to go somewhere else, instead of sticking at that particular club and working hard and trying to get your place back in the team. Unfortunately, a learning curve for me as a young player was you didn't really have that guidance. And while your father and your mother were there to support you, they didn't have that knowledge that's going about now. So I would move quite a lot. And again, looking back on my career and the playing side of it, I done quite a lot. But if I had to go back, I probably wouldn't move about as much, because it didn't really get you a good reputation. Because when things weren't going well, everybody knew you would just move. But I went on to then play for Armagh City, where I had 5 really, really good years, and Colin Malone at the manager at the time, giving my Irish League debuts. Played in the Premiership, played in Division 1, played in Division 2. Toe Cochran was my manager at reserves and had a lot of faith in me. One of the managers who probably had the biggest influence in my career, because he gave me a chance. And then played for Loughgall for numerous times too. And again, my Irish League debut for Loughgall, I think Andy Smith gave me a back pass and I was sent off in like the 43rd minute, and I think Davy Johnson, who was the manager at that time. So bit of a sort of industrious and sort of travelled about in Northern Ireland and played at a reasonably level, but realistically I wasn't good enough to go across the water to play.
And going across the water, was it an ambition of yours, or were you happy playing where you were at, or did you always strive to try and get that chance?
I think it's every young boy's dream and young girl's dream to now be a professional footballer across the water. But until I was a coach, I didn't really understand the playing side much. I thought it was just a matter of you going out to play and then hopefully be scouted. But now it's how many times you touch the ball during the week, what teams you play for, what sacrifices you make away from the football field, not just on the football field. The football field is the easiest part for a player now. It's how they train, how they eat, how they sleep, how they keep a record of themselves, how they conduct themselves on and off the field. All this stuff is so important, but I didn't realise all that stuff until I started taking a sort of route into the coaching journey. Mm-hmm. So again, if I'd mixed my coaching experience now, mixed into the player that I was, I probably would have ended up better because of this guidance and knowledge. But I guess it's the old cliche your mum or dad used to say, if I had known what I know now, when you're a young age, mm-hmm. you probably would have been more successful.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
For sure.
So just before we get into your coaching journey, what advice would you give to a young player, coming through at any level at this stage?
I think now it's so important to make sure that you approach your playing journey with the utmost professionalism. Now coming as a young 8 or 9, 10-year-old player, the contact time on the ball that you have, most teams here only operate 2-3 times a week, depending on the team and what level you play for, and whenever young players go across the water, it's usually the contact time, it's usually the environment, it's usually the high caliber of coaching that catches them out, not really their ability, just how comfortable they are on the ball and how they can deal with different scenarios when they go up against different players who basically train every day. So like I think saying off camera, I think now the idea of having an individual coach is massive because it gives those players extra contact time on the ball. And one thing now going back into management for me is I would have a position specific coach that just works with those players on an individual basis, whether that be a right back, central midfielder, striker, because the club coach will always try and devise a session around his team, mm-hmm. Where the individual might be a defender, and if it's an attacking session, the defender might not get anything out of it unless there's an assistant coach ghost coaching in the session. So for me, the amount of contact time, what I've learned along all the countries is contact time is definitely massive, and that's probably something that the pathway in Ireland and Northern Ireland has developed with the IFA pathway in regards to Club NI and the IFA Girls programme. The amount of contact time now the players are getting, maybe up to 4 or 5 times a week, is excellent. And again, in the last couple of months you've seen the rewards in regards to the international women's, mm-hmm. and Alfie Wiley deserves a lot of credit for that, although Kenny's done an amazing job, changed the mindset and really went out to win games. I think in regards to the pathway and the girls that the pathway is providing now for the new international manager is clear to be seen. So that's, for me, it would be contact time. That's the main buzzword for me.
Mm-hmm. So you're playing away, and you took your first couple of steps into coaching. How did that kind of come about? Was that something that was in your head maybe for a few months or years leading up to the first time, or how did you kind of fall into the coaching position?
I probably was never interested in school, to be honest, and football was just my always go-to thing. I would have got home from school, I would have threw my school bag in to the living room, and I went out to play. And me and my friends at the time, we used to play sort of housing estates against housing estates, and I found myself always me being the person who's recruiting the team, so I'd have rapped on their doors and I'd have got those players in, and we'd have played our 5v5 game. So even at that age, maybe at 14, 15, I sort of took my first step into management, really, yes. by just doing something that we done for fun, and that was that. And then I was playing, obviously I played for Northern Ireland up until U16, and I always was infatuated by what went on and representing your country and representing the best teams that you possibly could represent. Obviously being coached by Alfie Wiley in the BP regional counties at that time, You know, I was just always interested in football. So when I realised I wasn't going to be a player, the next step was to try and be a coach. So I was playing for Armagh City at the time, and then their women's team needed a coach. So they decided that if I took it, they would put me through my B licence. So that's it, really. That's what got me on the coach education ladder. And the rest is history, really. That's the route I've decided that I went down, because there was loads of male coaches knocking about, and there was well represented male coaches knocking about in Irish League, Mid Ulster League, Intermediate League. So I said, maybe this is a route where if you stick by it and you're successful, maybe it's something that you could go on and progress your journey. And to be honest, after Armagh City, I stayed in the women's game. So went on then to do my A licence, and now elite youth A licence, and now going on to my pro licence. But the pro licence is obviously very difficult to get on, because it's every 2 years and there's only 20 people allowed on it. So it's, unless you're probably a high profile coach, not sort of managing the lower teams in professional football or whatever it may be. Even though I feel coaching at Forfar Farmington in the Scottish Premier League was the top level in women's football, operating at the top of your game. Even coaching Linfield when I was a Linfield manager and qualifying for the Champions League and stuff. You know, every time I've applied for that licence, you know, I've always unfortunately got a letter saying I haven't been successful. But like anything in life, you just have to keep going, and hopefully that in coming years, or you get another post, and then hopefully your organisation and your governing body feel that you're good enough to get a place on that. But if I do get on it, it's by merit. It's not by knowing anybody. It's not by, you know, having somebody as my friend. It's, you know, it's by merit, by doing something, and I've worked really hard to do it. From starting from Armagh City with the girls, where one man and his dog would have watched the game, to now being on TV against Celtic, 2-2 draw with a limited budget, you know, in the Scottish Women's Premier League, you know, and that's been done by hard work. It's been done by research, it's been done by coach education, it's been done with people who's helped you along the way. But that's what I would say to any young aspiring coach, that there'll be obstacles in the way, but you have to keep positive, and you have to keep your beliefs, and you have to keep pushing until you finally get there. But even if you do get to the pro licence, which is obviously the highest qualification, you never stop learning. So there's always new coaches, there's always new methods, and there's always new people discovering these. So like Bielsa and Guardiola and Mourinho and all these people, they all bring new ideas all the time. So even though you have those qualifications and it looks good on paper and it allows you to apply for big jobs, you know, the best learning place is on the pitch.
Mm-hmm. So just when you started your coaching journey, and you know, you start off with Armagh City and you do quite well there, did you ever envisage that it would take you on the journey it has, and that you would probably be one of the most sought after coaches in the country in the women's game? Or, you know, where did you see yourself going when you done your B licence and you maybe were successful on the pitch, and you know, it just snowballed? Where was your objective, or what was your goal?
The ultimate goal is obviously to be the best that you can be. One of my goals is I would love to be the country's manager, national team manager, women's team manager. Is it too high to go there? I don't know. Time will tell, I guess. But that was my ultimate ambition whenever I started to take the step into the women's game. Where I seen myself go in the women's game, I suppose what I thought honestly was that if I was successful at that time, because people weren't interested in women's football and there wasn't that many qualified coaches or good coaches in the game, I always felt a wee bit ahead of the rest. Because just now when you see Phil Neville Now when you see Gareth Taylor, now when you see Scott Booth, Malachi Thompson, Kenny Shields, now when you see all those guys getting involved in women's football now, these guys wouldn't have got involved in women's football 20 years ago. It's probably now 17 years where I started coaching women's football. You know, when you look at Alfie was in the women's game for a long time and way ahead of his time, and he was brilliant. And I guess that's the route that I was trying to go down, saying, oh, okay, if I can get into club management in women's game, be successful, then I have a chance to be successful on the international stage, stroke professional women's football, England, Scotland, or even America, where I've coached. But yeah, Armagh City done well. We got promotion, I think. And then their neighbours, the rivals, Loughgall, then asked me to come across. We got to a cup final. I think we were beating a cup final, and we got promoted to the Premier League. And then it was tough because I was then offered a job at Newry as academy manager, and one of my remits was to start a women's team. So along with James Feehan and John Feehan, we tried to, or we didn't try, we successfully built a women's team that eventually went on to play in the Champions League, I think. And that's another proud moment, even though I wasn't there for the whole journey, to be one of the pioneers of that in the Newry City area. You know, that's a proud moment for me as well. And then obviously I then went to travel in America, came back, and I think you were in the car when I got offered the Linfield job. We were coming back from a coaching session, and I think you were in the car whenever I got offered the Linfield job. So went on to Linfield, and the Linfield one speaks for itself. 8 trophies over a 3-year period, qualifying for the Champions League, a lot of your players representing their country. You know, for me, that'll always be my highlight in the women's game, because the success we achieved from saving the club from relegation, playing Loughgall, funny enough, in a playoff, and then from going from that to double, treble, I think. You know, that's an amazing achievement, and I don't think people actually understand just how much work went on there. But that was down to great coaching staff, it was down to great players, and it was down to the ethos that everybody bought into it. The coaching team bought into it, the players bought into it, and then as we were successful, then that sort of breeded a lot of confidence, and we were hard to stop, which then presented me with loads more opportunities to go abroad, I guess.
So Ryan, you played in the men's game, you moved into coaching in the women's game. Is there any, differences between the two? What's the differences? What's the similarities?
I think that's the $1 million question. Everybody sort of asks, what's the main difference in the women's game compared to the men's game? To me, on a coaching perspective, there's not too much difference. To me, the drills are still the same, the objectives are still the same, how you prepare for a match, how you devise a training session, whatever that may be. You still have opposition, you still have 11v11 on the pitch, and you still have all the scenarios, your set plays, your danger players, your video analysis. You still have all that as part of the game. It's football at the end of the day. For me, probably the most valuable experience I've had in the women's game is, again, how you treat them, how you deal with them on a daily basis. Girls, obviously, I think girls are better learners than boys. I think girls will take more information in and digest it and then try and be perfect, whereas a boy will just near enough do it 60% or 70%. I think a girl's a perfectionist in regards to the detail that they try and sort of absorb and then digest and then try and obviously execute it on the field. But more so man management and dealing with the different things, obviously different things that come in the women's game as being a female athlete. Obviously their cycles, relationships, schoolwork, families, all stuff like that. All stuff probably that happens sort of 50% on the boys' side. There's two or three extra things that happen on the girls' side that you really have to be sort of clued in, and that's why it's really, really important. I'm a big advocate of having female staff on your coaching side, because female athletes and female coaches obviously understand the female body more, and I guess probably more physically, strength and conditioning. You know, girls obviously with different parts of their body are more sort of impacted in injuries, obviously, like their knees, their ankles, their lower back, stuff like that. So having specialist coaches that can plan programs around the female body, that's probably the biggest change that I've came in contact with, and how I treat them and how we deal with them on a daily basis. But in regards to what's the difference on a football related issues, I don't think there's too much. I think they sort of just mirror each other. It's 11v11, you're still trying to beat an opposition, you know, you do your video analysis, you do all that stuff that you do in the men's game. So that would be my biggest difference, I guess, coaching in it.
And in terms, you said you've kind of experienced like difference in man management. Is there anything you can kind of go back and pinpoint? Was there an occasion where the penny dropped that, you know, you maybe can't do things in the women's game that you could in the men's? Or?
Yeah, definitely. There's one that sticks out in my mind, and I'll never forget it, and I always tell it. My first job was Armagh City, and we had a range of players in the team. So we had 14-year-olds right up to maybe 30-year-olds, and we came in at half time. I think we were playing Downpatrick at the time, and we come into the changing room, and I wasn't happy with the performance. But whenever I was playing, and if my manager wasn't happy with her performance, he would have come in, he would have kicked water bottles, he would have went mad. So I thought this was the right thing to do. Because I was uneducated in regards to coaching. I was only starting my coaching journey. I didn't realise I was dealing with different types of players. I just thought that that's what you do at halftime in a dressing room when you didn't play well. I think I got a brand new coat from them, and I went in at halftime, and I gave them the Alex Ferguson hairdryer treatment. I ripped off my coat, broke the coat, and kicked water bottles. And I realised after that there was 13, 14-year-olds, only young kids, sitting in the changing room, mixed with different, obviously, experienced players at a different age group. But I realised there that this is not how management worked, and definitely not how coaching the female athlete worked. So that was a massive, massive mistake in my coaching journey, but I'm lucky it happened at the start of my coaching journey. That's not being said going down the line that you can't tell players off, and you can't give them advice, and you can't do things sometimes that, you know, triggers a reaction wanting to come out in second half. But how I behaved in that moment, I'll never forget it, and that was my biggest learning curve, and it's never happened ever again, you know, because you have to take it into perspective that these kids were only playing, learning the game, and I thought I was just going to be the big man coming in at half time, telling people off and flying water bottles and ripping coats, and it's never happened again. Fair enough. So, but I'm sort of glad I made that mistake early, because it's definitely moulded me of who've been in management in the women's game.
This podcast is brought to you by JN Haar. JN Haar embroider all our training gear at PSA. They also have a hardware shop and specialise in plant hair. All our details is linked in the description box below. So you've obviously been extremely successful in this country. You've coached in America, and you've coached in 3 or 4 other countries. Do you just want to briefly give us a wee kind of overview of where you've been, and maybe the one or two, if you can do it briefly, the one or two things maybe you've picked up from each country, just a wee brief summary.
Yeah, well, I always focused on the women's game no matter where I went. So moving to America, I went to America 4 times to coach women's football, and they were just light years ahead. Obviously, what Alfie's doing here at the Pathway in America, they start so young. You know, they start at fours and fives, and they work their way up to 19. Then obviously the players will then move on to college, and then possibly the way the American system worked is as an NWSL draft, where those college players then get picked for the NWSL teams. I was lucky enough to coach in the women's program at very successful competitive clubs. I think I won 2 state cups with them. We qualified for the regionals, and then I was offered the WPSL job of the Lady Rafters in Louisiana. That was a startup franchise run by Will Broyles, and he bought the club. And the previous year their men's team was very successful, so the next year he wanted to add a women's team to that. And that started from scratch. That was recruitment, trying to get overseas players in, going to watch college games, and then building the team up. And in our first year we qualified for the playoffs. I think we were beating the first round of the playoffs, but to get the team into the playoffs in the first season of the franchise was an amazing achievement. And again, you had the whole of Shreveport coming out to watch you, so you maybe had 4,000 or 5,000 fans watching a WPSL game, and that happened regularly. And then moved into the Michigan area, where I coached at a WPSL team and a competitive team. Moved into Texas, moved around America quite a bit, into Connecticut, which was great, fond memories there. And then, from America, coached in the Russian second division with a team called FC Strogino. Moved on to China, where we coached for a coaching company, but I was sort of deployed into FC Guangzhou, coaching their women's team there.
And you spent some time in South Africa also?
Yep, worked for a college called Waterstone College based in Johannesburg. Spent a good 12-14 months there. It was funny because just after the World Cup in South Africa, Mexico actually used Waterstone as their base. So what they done was they built 2 big FIFA fields, strength and conditioning room. They had the state-of-the-art floodlights, AstroTurf pitch. The changing rooms had all the posters of all the Mexican team players in their wee alcoves, signed and autographed. It was amazing. The facilities were unbelievable. And my job going in there was to run the men's and college side. And we were very successful. And we were actually lucky enough to have 2 boys, Dylan Buffton and Musa Congo, play for the South African under-20 team. And then we had Simone Sauls and Jessica Wade represent the South African women's team. So that was really successful.
So that was your time in South Africa, and then most recently you've been in Kenya.
Yeah, and then moved on to obviously Scotland with Forfar in the SWPL. We achieved, I think we were 2 points off 4th position in the SWPL just before I left in December. I think we were either 4th or 5th, and we had achieved better points total than the season before. And that was a good achievement, working on a limited budget. But again, some Northern Irish players came in, Lauren Perry, Billy Simpson, Jade Lindsay, Kirsty Fraser, she was Scottish, London Pollard, who's just moved to Celtic this week. Some of these players really aided to the Forfar team and made the team a lot stronger. The addition to Kevin, who on my backroom team, who's now the manager, he was a great addition and went on to stay when I left. It was a real special time there. Scottish people are lovely people. The people who looked after me, Karen Bruce, who's the physio at the club, she looked after me, and I miss them dearly every day. But unfortunately, just my vision didn't match the club's vision, and that's why I moved on. So hence into Kenya, offered the opportunity to go to Emerging Stars Football Academy based in Kenya, based in Nairobi. Basically, it was a brand new academy, started off with no players, and my task was to set the academy up. In Kenya, you see African footballers are the most technical footballers probably you'll ever see in the world. Once they're born, they're born with a football at the end of their foot. They're just so technical, both boys and girls. But there's no structures, and obviously poverty plays a big part in that. So our aim at Emerging Stars was to try and recruit the best talent within the academy. Set up all the structures in place, obviously the values, the philosophy, the curriculum, recruit staff, and we recruited some amazing staff, former professional players, both Harambee Stars and Harambee Starlets, which are national team for the men's, national team for the women's. So we hired Ronald Lacoth, former professional footballer, brilliant coach, brilliant guy. Stephen Achola, former U Lindsay captain, which is in the Kenyan Premier League, and a former Kenyan international. Again, another amazing guy, along with Betty Ochang and Mary Odabo. Both, one was actually the assistant manager of the national team, one was the team manager of the national team for the women's team. So we recruited a high-profile staff regarding Kenyan football. And in the space of 5-6 weeks, we built the academy up to 65 players. So our target was 100 in 10 weeks. Unfortunately, COVID hit. So after the 2.5 months in Kenya, unfortunately, I went into lockdown. So obviously, I had to return home. So the ambition is still to try and proceed with the academy and try and link up with a Premiership team here in England, link it up with a KPL team to give it a pathway, so the players can both go with avenues into Europe and both into avenues into Europe. And if they can't make Europe, then they can play in their normal Kenyan Premier League, which is probably the equivalent to our Irish League. So that would be the steps, and then we just, over lockdown, we've spent again using Zoom and using sort of my contacts in regards to coach education, virtual training for the coaches and for the players, and it's been successful. And again, they've never seen stuff like that before, so it's really a big bonus to them. So I think they get the go ahead to open up now in the last week of May. So I'll really be excited to see just exactly how they push on from here. But they're very, very, very talented guys, and the amount of coaching knowledge that they've received over the last couple of months in regards to periodization courses, they've done IFA courses, they've done Scottish FA courses, they've done loads. So I'm very excited to see how they develop and make the academy a success in coming weeks. Until now, I'm sort of obviously trying to recharge the batteries and looking at the next opportunity. And again, there's some opportunities in England and Scotland, but it's just a matter of trying to get one over the line for now.
Fantastic. So you've clearly had an incredible career. You've worked in so many different countries with so many different people, so many different cultures. Is there any, differences in terms of culture, differences the way people behave, where they carry themselves, the way you have to be in front of people? What's the differences from country to country, or just from 2 or 3 countries?
Yeah, America is not so much. America, obviously, same language, same sort of culture in regards to food, in regards to how they play the game, stuff like that. It hasn't really been a challenge. I guess the biggest ones were Russia and China. Obviously, Russia, when I was at Strigino, I think we were training minus 15. I'm wrapped up, snood, hat, gloves. We're working on a 3G pitch. That's 3G sort of undersoil heating, and I'm coaching the team, and we have a translator working with me, and I'm giving them instructions, and the translator then is telling the players in Russian what I expect them to do. So the language barrier in both Russia and China, working with translators, was massive. Russia's food probably was hard to deal with, especially for some of the overseas players. They couldn't quite get what they ate all the time. Language barrier was a massive was a massive issue at times. But as the longer you go on, you sort of pick up the buzzwords, and then when you're coaching the session, you sort of get different words and different phrases that you can use, that you can sort of carry yourself in regards to executing your session. China, the same, a culture in China was that if your father or mother was an athlete, whenever they had a baby, that's what they would be. So I remember going to the National Gymnastics Federation to watch how they trained their athletes, and it was disturbing. It was a young 5-year-old athlete, and they were trying to learn her how to do the splits, and they would time them, and they had to hit that specific time to let them move on to the next exercise. And this kid in question, her mother was a Olympic gymnast, and the little girl couldn't quite do the splits, so she kept always stopping at like 4 minutes 50 or 4 minutes 55. But because they wanted her to go for 5 minutes, the coach actually sat on the girl to make her do the splits right to 5 minutes. And like, if we see that happening in our culture, we wouldn't have that. If a coach was doing something that a parent didn't agree with, you'd actually get brought up in front of different people to say that wasn't acceptable. But it just goes to show you the different cultures, that kid was sort of stereotyped that she was going to be an Olympic athlete like her mother, and they would put her through all the paces and make sure she hit all the objectives, no matter what age she was and what objectives she was going. So that was a big eye-opener for me in regards to a different type of culture, and that's probably why they're so successful. And I think the Chinese are the most successful in regards to gymnasts when they compete in the Olympics and stuff. But that's why, as soon as they're born by an Olympic Olympic athlete, their offspring's going to be an Olympic athlete, or that's the plan. And the government looks after the Olympians, paying their house, paying their food, and so on. But they're just some of the stories that you come up against. Mm-hmm. I think South Africa won. I think my first match for the college was sitting on the sideline, and the other opposing manager brought a goat's head up to me with the blood dropping down, and he set it on my dugout, and he said something in, I don't know what it was, Afrikaans I think, and it translated to be, "White Chief, you're dead." So these are some of the stories that you can't substitute that.
Yeah.
And it's really, really good. And when you can tell them, you laugh at them. At the time, it wasn't like that. At the time, I probably went really, really white because I didn't know what was happening. But when on hindsight, or when you look back, you sort of laugh because you're like, wow, you can't believe that you're in that moment at that time. Yeah. So I've been blessed to have some stories like that. I've been blessed to work with some amazing players. I've been blessed to work in some amazing countries. So, long may it continue, I guess.
Fantastic. From you started out on your journey till now, working in all them different environments, how would you look at yourself now as a manager or coach? What's maybe the 3 or 5 things that you've learned and you've developed and you've took with you throughout your journey? I
think the biggest one for me is how you treat people. I think when you look at C licensed coaches, B licensed coaches, A licensed coaches, pro licensed coaches, I think now we have a big selection of those coaches, and you go onto YouTube, you buy books, you go and watch different people's sessions, and the information out there to put on a real good session is very, very easy now. For me, it's how you have that connection with the players. For me, it's how you get the best out of your players. So for me, the biggest thing that I've learned out of all over the cultures has been how you treat people. And that's now probably where I sort of say to myself, whenever I go into different clubs, you have to make them feel unique. You have to be able to make them smile. You have to be able to make them relate to what's going on the football field, but you also have to show a bit of empathy in regards to what happens off the field, because everybody's just human. Everybody has a life outside of football. So understanding your players is massive. And I think if you understand your players, then you'll get the best out of them, because they'll really genuinely think that you care. And when you show an interest in them, that goes without saying. And again, Linfield was a big learning curve for me, because how we connected with each other, how we built that rapport with each other, and how the group was just one. That's why we were successful. And I've been lucky enough, really blessed and lucky enough, that anywhere I've went in regards to the clubs that I've went, we've been successful, whether that be winning a trophy, whether that be saving from relegation, whether that be qualifying for a playoff, or whether that just be obviously getting structures in place to having players represent their country at youth level or international level. Everybody will know the process and the curriculums and stuff like that, like I say, but I think it's how you connect. And the biggest thing for me as a head coach or a manager is how I've connected with my staff, how I've connected with my players, and then bring the best out of them. And again, the person you had previous on your podcast, probably one of the best managers I've ever met, in Lee Feeney. Fantastic player. His playing career goes without saying, but he brought something different. He had a charisma. He had great man management skills, and everybody who has played for him, I know he was probably probably was the best manager that I ever come across playing for Banbridge Rangers, because he was just brilliant. He could just relate to you. And I think, again, that's probably why Alex Ferguson was so successful, because he just kept evolving and he understood the players, and then when he couldn't coach anymore, he brought in people to coach around him, but he still always evolved and related to the people and the age groups that he was surrounding himself with. So for me, that's the biggest learning curve for me.
Fantastic. And it is probably one of the most under talked about things is, your people skills, and it's definitely coming more to the fore now in recent times.
Definitely.
How would you see, if I was to walk in and I didn't know your team was playing, what would be the 2 or 3 key things that would be connected to you and your team?
I think the Northern Irish sort of mentality will definitely be connected with my sort of teams. I've come from a family where my mother and father worked 2 jobs to keep my family and my brothers and sisters, to provide us with everything we ever needed. Even though they might not have been the 200-pound predators, I always got what I needed to do play, as well as my brothers, as well as my sisters. So I come from a hard-working background, and again, that's something that I ask my players to do whenever they go on the field. They have to work hard. That's one of my non-negotiables. I think the other thing is like there's no blame culture in the camp. So when one person makes a mistake, it's all of our mistake, because we don't go out to make mistakes every week. These things happen. We're not perfect, and we do have a sort of vulnerable side to us. But for me, hard work, my teams have to play with empathy, and we have to respect everybody. We don't fear the teams that we play, and again, that's where I think in some of the teams that I've coached to date, we've changed that mentality from fearing teams that we've played until we've changed the mindset to say, you know what, we're going to go out, we're going to work hard, we're going to respect the opposition, but we won't fear them. And I think the last one for me is, just try and be the best you can be. If you're well prepared during the week, there's no reason why you can't go out and do your best. Whether that be playing, whether it be 4-4 playing against Glasgow City, whether it be 4-4 playing against Celtic, whether it be Linfield playing against Glentoran at the time, you had to still this belief that anything was possible, and not saying that has been sort of our buzzword in this country, dare to dream. That's what I say to all my players and teams that I coach. Nothing's impossible, and so I just try and give them that belief. The DNA, how do you play? I try to play just in what's dealt in front of me. I have to adapt. I think if you look at Thomas Tuchel now at Chelsea, he adapts to all the teams he's playing. I think if you look at Guardiola has one staunch way of playing, and he won't change that no matter what players come in or come out. But for me, in the industry that I'm in the women's game, I think adoption is definitely key, because you play against different people with different strengths on a regular basis. So for me, not being the top team in the league, I have to find ways, and my players have to find ways to try and cause an upset. So adaptability too, I guess, is a big thing for me.
I know you're a massive Jose Mourinho fan and have been since he's really come on the scene, but what maybe 2 or 3 managers do you look up to? Do you maybe take ideas from the aspire to be?
Yeah, Jose Mourinho obviously has been the favourite. He came in to the English Premiership about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, just whenever I was starting my journey. He was charismatic, he was successful, you know. He really had people eating out of the palm of his hand when he first came into the game, and I just loved that about him. And I've sort of tried to emulate that as I've went on. Yeah, Brendan Rodgers is definitely one of my favourites. And then when you come to look at the local game, Lee Feeney definitely has to be one. What he's achieved in. Gary Hamilton, I'm a big fan of Gary Hamilton, what he's achieved in the Irish League. To be honest with you, I look at those. I look at more local coaches now. Yes, Jose Mourinho, Brendan Rodgers, definitely the 2 people you aspire to be, and one being from our country and shows what can be done. But I love the Irish League circle. I love all what's been achieved there. You look at Tiernan Lynch at Larne, an up and coming young manager. Gary Hamilton, what he's done. You know, all these people have their own unique way, and they're all our version of Jose Mourinho's, Pep Guardiola's. So following the Irish League, you know, I would rather watch Irish League football than the Premiership football now, because it just gives you more excitement. But you know, hopefully I strive to be the likes of some of them in coming years. I'm still relatively young when it comes to being a manager, I guess. But you know, you have the Tiernans, you have Oran Kearneys, Gary Hamilton. You know, those are the people that definitely have the biggest influence on me, because that's where I watch most of the football. But to be a Brendan Rodgers leading them out in the FA Cup final on tomorrow or Saturday, that would be great if I could do that on the women's perspective.
Fantastic. On our final question, Ryan, just give us 3 pieces of advice for young aspiring coaches.
Yeah, I guess always wanting to learn. Try and get a mentor that you can follow, that you can ask advice of, because sometimes being a head coach, being a manager, is a lonely place to be, when, especially in club management, when things aren't going your way, or you have to make a difficult decision in playing a player or not playing a player, or trying to change the formation. So having someone to offer you advice or give their perspective is massive. And the third thing is just believe. Have that self-belief. Stick to your principles. Stick to what you believe in, and believe that anything's possible. Especially if you haven't come from a playing background like myself. Yes, I'll never have a Rangers behind my name. I'll never have a Chelsea behind my name. But I have obviously over now 17 years coaching experience. I've coached in 9 different countries. I've won numerous trophies in the women's game, you know, and I've been lucky enough to coach at the top level of women's leagues in Europe and UK and over the world. So anything's possible. So for me, work hard, always learn, find a mentor, you know, and stick to your beliefs and believe that anything's possible.
Excellent. Well, Ryan, that is the end of our podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Even though I've known you for 10 years, it feels like I've just, you know, there's so much there that's just new, and it's fantastic, and I'm sure our listeners will really enjoy that, and we wish you every success. Dear knows where you'll end up in the future, but wherever you end up, we wish you every success, and we hope everything goes well for you.
No problem, Matthew. Thanks so much.
Thank you to Maiden Mourne for the use of this space for this podcast.